So number 16, City of Houston, Texas meeting, call to order the Uptown Development Authority meeting. And the first item there is to approve the minutes of the February 27th, 2019 meeting, and that's the UDA green tab, page 1. After looking at those carefully, is there a motion for their approval?
So.
Second. Anyone opposed? Okay. The minutes have been approved. Our next item is, are there persons or person here who would like to make any comments at this time?
No one has signed up.
Okay. No one has signed up, no one has volunteered, so we'll move on to the next one. And that is on tab 2, page 5. You will find a series of invoices, and Shannon will discuss those.
Okay, thank you, sir. Page 5, we have a summary of our invoices that we're requesting board approval for the months of February and March. We did not have a board meeting in March, so everything is kind of double. For reimbursements to the district for admin and miscellaneous, $150,000. For the professional services on the Coastal Boulevard project that are the contracts held with the district. For those 2 months, we had just over $710,000 worth of invoices. And then on page 6, you see those UDA contracts that we have. For the 2 months, we have roughly $681,000 worth of invoices to approve, for a total of professional services to the tune of $1.54 million. For our UDA construction contracts that were previously approved by the board, and these are just the payments for the various projects, $5.6 million. All in all, just over $7.15 million of invoices and or construction contracts for you. The next pages, 7 through 10, 11, it's just a little bit more description of the contracts and the works that they're doing for us. And then lastly, do we get a motion to approve that F-1C? You'd like to request a motion to approve these invoices for payments. Are there questions or concerns first?
Shannon,
Yes, sir.
what's shown here is the current, I'm looking for the grand total of 7.1 million.
7.1
The
million.
1.5 represents what?
The 1.5 represents a total of what we're reimbursing the district for admin, the $150,000, what we're reimbursing the district for the Coastal Boulevard consultants that support the construction, and then the 681 of UDA contracts where they're doing mostly stuff in the park as well, to the 1.5.
I have just a question on the name of this company, Uprising Consulting. What do they do?
Yeah, that's the administrative and project support for the Coastal Boulevard project. She supports.
I have a young lady with an attitude.
Supports Robert Potter.
She does very good work. That's Rachel.
That's facts.
She is in support to Mr. Toddy's efforts to manage all the consultants and their real pay and status contracts.
Okay. I just didn't recall seeing that name before, but anyway.
I saw
She
that.
was previously working for Gunda.
Oh, okay.
And she went out on her own, formed a company, and it's a savings to us
So recently, huh?
Well,
within a year.
Okay. So,
And that is a Patricia.
No, that's
No, that's Uprising.
Rachel Nowicki.
Rachel Nowicki is her name, Uprising Consulting.
well, I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries, so the invoices have been approved. And I think the next item on page 13, Shannon, you're getting ready to start.
The
Is
DBE
the
report.
WDD report.
Thank you. Page 13, we have a summary of our MWDD SBE expenditures. The first half kind of looks at cumulative year-to-date. Over the years, we've done 38% for professional services with a goal of 24, and for construction, 21% with a goal of 17. This fiscal year to date,
You will find in your board package the paper version of the presentation that I have. And I want to go over our existing budget as we're completing this fiscal year, and then present to you our recommended and proposed budget for the coming 2019-2020 fiscal year budget. We began the year, this fiscal year, with a beginning fund balance of just under $33 million in place. The 2018 tax increment after debt and other contributions are made resulted in having about $3.45 million available for construction or undertaking projects. We had a grant of just under $21 million, bond proceeds of $28 million, so total revenue available of a little over $52 million. Along with the beginning fund balance, around $85 million that were available at the beginning of this fiscal year. We are projecting to expend by the end of June a total of $72,240,000. It's been a very, very big year, giving us a projected ending fund balance of just under $13 million, about $12.81 million. So where do we spend those funds on? In this, you'll see that.
John, excuse me, before we spend it, can we go back?
Yes, sir.
The grant revenue, is that single federal grant, or is there?
That is only the Federal Transit Administration grant. We received a total of $62 million over the period of this the Post Oak Boulevard project, of which about 42, I think, are applied to Post Oak Boulevard, and the remainder on the transit center down south at West Park. Okay. So we're spending all of that. Primarily, this was we had really, we call core projects, or those projects like secondary street network, a Post Oak Lane, Uptown Park, or something else. We call that a core project. It also includes the operating costs for the water wall. So we had expended just less than $2 million of our budget in that area. Our regional transit projects were our big investment, completing the Post Oak Boulevard project. Post Oak Boulevard alone, with some small amount of right-of-way actually occurring last year, was primarily construction. Our West Loop bus lanes, TxDOT is building it, and the Uptown Development Authority has agreed to give them $20 million in four different payments of $5 million each. We've made 2 of those payments this year, plus a little kicker for some additional improvements that made as part of the West Loop project. And then we have spent just under $11 million on the Transit Center South, and that will be one of our projects for this coming year. We'll complete that hopefully by December this year. Memorial Park, about $4.2 million. That was primarily 3 areas, consultants as part of the 10-year plan implementation, and then also some additional funds for green space maintenance as well as ecological restoration. So 72, we can go into some detail on those, but those represent the primary area. Looking at our proposed budget, does anybody have a question about kind of a recap of last year's budget? If we need to go back, and I can always go back. I want to take a moment, and I don't want to confuse everybody, but I want all of you to kind of understand where our money comes from and where do we spend it. If I could, you look up here, if you'll see under revenue, our TIRZ collects revenue from the City of Houston as well as the Houston Independent School District. The City of Houston revenue accounted for about $35 million this coming year, and HISD about $17 million. So the total tax increment that we get is over $50 million a year. it's interesting note that HISD money, a third of that money goes straight back to HISD, and they use it building campuses, etc. Another third of the HISD money, along with a third of the City of Houston money, goes into affordable housing. So each year, we're kicking off something north of $15 million a year into affordable housing, which goes to the City of Houston, and they administer and decide how that money is spent. The City of Houston also charges us is it 5% administrative fee amounting to $1.7 million, and then the city municipal services fee of 5.5. So by the time we are getting down ready for revenue available before debt service, so we started out with 52, and there has been, that looks awful close to $30 million deduct, is that correct?
Yeah,
29. And then our debt service payments are about $18 million a year, and that ends up for this coming year that we have $5.2 million available for construction projects. New, I would say, increment. We have bond proceeds and other revenue sources.
Goes fast.
The rich for sure.
So
We spent that real fast.
I think that, and I'd be glad to go through this, but I had occasion to visit with Andy Ick in the City of Houston, and was talking about affordable housing funds that were available, and he quoted a number, it was like 14 million when we had that conversation. It was 14,300,000 and some thousand, and I said, well, 14,100,000 is coming from the Uptown TIRZ. And he says, it can't be. And I said, look it up. And thank you. So the bottom line is, you can see that although the TIRZ is a mechanism for generating a significant amount of funds, education facilities, affordable housing is a big winner, and then the city is picking up, several $1 million of additional fees. So I think that's something that, as you're walking around and you run into someone and they say something about how TIRZ funding goes, the reality is, out of that number, we have this to work with, and that's significant. Not belittling that, but it's also significant to note where the rest of the funds go. Any questions?
John, thank you for that. It seems to be two pieces of misinformation out there that we ought to maybe discuss real quickly. One is that the TIRZ is not participating in the general city budget.
Right.
So we're only looking at the increment here, as well as a lot of things that flow back to different parts of the city budget. So that's just flatly inaccurate. There's a great deal of revenue being raised in the area for the city's budget in general and specific parts. Only some of the money, a relatively small part, is focused on infrastructure in the uptown area. If we lost that, we'd lose the opportunity to get grants from a lot of other government agencies. So that focusing really creates leverage from other governments. So the city's really better off with the TIRZ from all points of view. The other misinformation that seems consistent out there is that TIRZs are only appropriate in blighted areas. And I'd just like to point out, once again, we say this a lot, blight's not in the legislation that created the TIRZs. They have evolved over a long period of time, and that's just simply no longer anybody's premise to base our existence on. So thanks for pointing those two things out. Sorry, that was a long question.
Well, I think those points are well made, and let me say that given if a TIRZ were to be dissolved, those debt service payments would have to continue to be made. And a question about where you get the funds to do that. But because of RevCap, if you actually were able to take out a TIRZ, those funds don't go anywhere, they disappear because we're RevCap. All right, so I wanted to give you some sense, because this is kind of mystical when we do all the calculations behind the curtain. I think you miss a lot of what's going on about what the TIRZ is actually doing. And so if we bring that $12.81 million of beginning fund balance, which was the ending fund balance for last year, we then take that $5.2 million of tax increment available. We are completing the grant revenues for this year, and our interesting note here about revenue sources, as we undertake particularly the Land Bridge project with Memorial Park Conservancy, we will be carrying those contracts. They will be providing revenue to us to pay their portion of it. And so you will see for the first time in our budgeting process, revenues coming in from an outside source such as the Memorial Park Conservancy. We will draw down about $7.7 million on our note program that you approved, and we will ask for some authorization today. Total revenue available of $25 million. And so if you add those two together, we have just less than $38 million of funds available for capital projects. We're programming and spending essentially $38 million, having a small ending cash balance this coming year. Where we'll be spending the money, the core projects, remember I talked about those being the local streets, sidewalks, et cetera, in this area, even flooding and drainage projects. We have a very minor program this coming year. Those funds are largely funds to do engineering on projects, engineering design on projects that we want to be in place for to move forward and seek some funding. Funding for some drainage projects as well as design of trails and things like that, where we're asking for some federal grants to help build trails to connect to Memorial Park. The other major area would be our regional transit projects. This is a code for Post Oak Boulevard and for the Transit Center. We'll be closing out these projects. It is our intent to have the Transit Center completed by the end of this calendar year. About the middle of the fiscal year. Post Oak Boulevard is quickly winding down with the majority of the work done by the end of May.
John, are we
Yes, sir.
contributing anything to the Northwest Transit Center?
We're not contributing anything to Northwest Transit Center. It's totally a metro project. And then finally, we do see then the pickup of spending here for Memorial Park. And we'll go over the 5-year capital improvement program here in just a moment, but you'll see we're transitioning from focusing our efforts primarily on Post Oak Boulevard and other infrastructure in the core of the Uptown area. For over the next 3 years, we're going to be largely a park building program. And so this is, we hope to give you, this gives you a little overall insight to what revenues are and where they're being spent over the next 5 years. And I'll just point this out. If you look at core projects, the reality is there are not a lot of funds being expended there. And in fact, about $3 million of this is what we're anticipating getting from the Texas Department of Transportation in the, if you will, re-landscaping, re-greening of the West Loop after all their projects are done. Regional transit will largely be done, and we're carrying some funds over as we wind down the transit center. Metro, we have a commitment to them to pay $5 million of their system improvements, the fare collection system, et cetera. And those funds could be spent really late June, perhaps. Our payments to them could be after the 1st of July next year. As you can see, those projects are winding down, and there's nothing in that area to replace that. And then finally, you look at the expenditures for Memorial Park, if you will, how it builds up at $16 million this year, and this grows. I remind you that about 4/7 of all of those expenditures are coming out of the Memorial Park Conservancy, and so that doesn't represent all 100% the Uptown Development Authority funding, but you can see how as we wind things down on infrastructure that the park takes its place. And then we are forecasting an additional bond sale in 2022. We're very tight here. We're very tight. The coming year, we begin to get some space financially, being able to do some additional projects. And then by the time we're out here at 23 or 24, we're beginning to be able to live on almost cash alone without the need for additional debt financing for the remaining life of the TIRZ. Generally, I could go into some of this a little bit more detail, but if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to try to answer.
John, what is in the revenue side of this, what is the risk that we might not achieve all or part of any of that revenue that's anticipated?
We are a tax increment zone. If there is no increment, then we can't meet these revenues. We have assumed a small growth this coming year, and Shannon, I think 4% thereafter. If you look at things from 2008, in the worst of times, we lost, I think about 10% of our value. That on $7 billion, 10% is a pretty big number. That was made up fairly quickly. I think by 2010, we had gotten back to the level we were. And if you looked at the history, the TIRZ or the management district all the way back into the late 80s, the 5 to 6% kind of growth has been a fairly conservative approach. We've had years where increment increased by almost 20%, and we've had years where we had some minor decrease. So you asked me what is the likelihood, and I just always have to say we have attempted to be conservative here, but in the end, there has to be increment for us to have money.
But there's no new consideration in the sense that we've always had the risk associated with the income.
That's who we are. And I think when we entered into the agreement on the tri-party agreement with the foundation, Memorial Park Conservancy, and ourselves, we had to make that case that the very best financial planning we can make, our best thoughts, our best historical evidence is that we are projecting a real life, workable financial plan. But if something really awful happened, we could not see growth, or we could see negative. I look out the window, and it suggests to me that we're continuing to see growth. What we aren't seeing is a significant growth in existing properties. That was pretty rampant, I would say, up in the last couple of years, and it has gotten much more conservative. Typically, we go through these cycles. Excuse me for kind of rambling here, but when times are tough, the appraisal district seems to carry commercial property at a high value a couple years into bad times. That all gets adjusted, and we come out and get a little bit more positive economy going on in Houston, and the commercial properties might be a year or two behind. But eventually, that kind of works in sync, and we see it. If we plotted for you, which we do, if we plotted the value for this area, it's a general line that's looking like that. Any other questions? Lewis, I don't know if that was
No,
that was
answers my question.
okay. I think that's all we have for the presentation of the budget. The way the budget process works is that we will vote on this today with any changes, recommendations from you. We will then, ultimately, this information is then passed on to the City of Houston, and the Houston City Council is the group that actually adopts the budget and makes it real at this time. You're basically approving the budget and recommending it to City Council.
So if there are no further questions to John, do we have a motion to approve the fiscal year 2020 budget?
So moved.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Mr. Chairman, could I interrupt you just one moment?
Yes, sir.
Okay, page 35, and in following, it basically is the budget you just approved in the city's format. It does nothing to inform or educate, and so we don't present it, but we will, the essence of what is in the city's format is what you just approved, in a format I think is a little bit more
And so they
fun.
don't see that.
They don't see
They
that, but
only see
they see
this.
it in the way they see it in this format.
Okay.
And everything we tell you is in the city format, it just doesn't communicate as well. It's there if you know where to look.
And they approved this budget as well.
City council is this is what they will approve, and it is the same thing.
So the TIRZ is not out there by itself.
No.
What we approved, the city also approved.
And
What you do is recommend to the city. What
We're
you-
subservient to the city.
What you recommend, city council considers.
Right.
and then how long does it take before they give their approval? I mean, when will
Mayor-
it show up on their?
Mayor Turner has been fairly successful of actually getting a budget approved before the end of June. And so that's the fiscal year is July 1. And I would think that he'll have it figured out and city council approved before the end of the year.
Do you ever have, or anyone from the TIRZ ever go down there and defend it?
Historically, we have, but we found that it's perhaps more productive to let others handle it.
How does the council member feel about the budget? Or do we even check?
I haven't visited with him personally, but I think that's a good suggestion.
Have we done it in the past?
Occasion. I would say not consistent. It's a good suggestion. I'll make that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And that wasn't my suggestion, it was a question.
It was, yeah.
Well, I think it's a question and a good suggestion.
Maybe.
Note purchase. I'm sorry, you guys.
No, I'm gonna
Note
ask my
purchase,
question.
Stephen, I think you're
Okay.
the lucky fellow here.
Back in August, this board approved the issuance of $27 million in notes, primarily to finance improvements in Memorial Park. And the notes are to be issued as funds are needed. So far, we've issued $600,000. And we're before you today with the request to issue up to $10 million in at least 2 requests, which is we have to send a request to the bank to purchase the notes. They have an agreement that they will purchase the notes. And interest rate is determined on the day of purchase. And the initial request we're going to send out is going to be $2 million, but we will send out some other requests with your permission later in the year. As of today, the rate is 2.69%. And these funds are going to be used to finance projects in Memorial Park, primarily the Central Connector.
So this acts like a line of credit essentially.
Essentially.
We're simply drawing down
Yes.
on that line with these notes.
But instead of just requesting a draw, you do a purchase request at the bank, they purchase a note and give us the money.
And so they have a handful of those.
Yeah, that's right.
Mr. Chairman, as Stephen said, we want to go out and secure $2 million in the near term. It was our feeling that it would get authority from you to draw down as we needed, limited to $10 million for the year. We don't mind coming back to you and asking for each one, but we thought that would be more of really a hindrance to, if we happen not to have quorum, or we happen not to have a board meeting, and we need additional funds, I wanted to explain the $10 million for the fiscal year, for the rest of this year and the coming fiscal year. We feel is probably a more efficient way, but we're willing to follow the board's wishes.
Let's talk about that a second. How would everyone feel, and would it be appropriate that when you issue them, that you simply notify the board that you're doing so in accordance with prior discussion and the agreement, so that it's not a surprise to anybody, as opposed to having to have a meeting, et cetera. I mean, that.
I'm
I
very
would be
comfortable with that.
Yes.
We probably ought to talk about it, see what everyone else feels about it.
My understanding that Central Connector is the land bridge
Yes.
for $70 million.
That's correct. Of which 40 million is being funded by the
Kinder Foundation.
Kinder Foundation.
Is it right?
By the Kinder Foundation.
So notes,
Have we done this in the past, Louis?
I don't know.
We have not, because we have not had a facility like this in place. I think the question before you is, are you more comfortable authorizing us to sell 2 million in notes right away and then come back to you for future authorizations? Or would you like to give us the authority to sell up to 10 million, because that's the amount that's been identified by staff as the needs for the next fiscal year?
With some form of notification. as
Sure,
we go through the year.
yes, obviously there'd be notification of the board that we've done.
It's not, you know, there's 6.7%.
Well, what was the question?
Interest rate's 2.6.
It's 2.69%.
Yeah.
2.69%.
I heard it 6.9,
Yeah.
I didn't.
The calculation is actually, it's 79% of LIBOR, 79% of 1 month LIBOR plus 72 basis points. And as of today, that's 2.69. And yes, it flows. And that's what the $2 million note that we're about to issue would be, 2.69.
I heard the 6.9, I didn't hear the
Okay.
2.6.
You wanted to issue the note yourself?
I wanted to buy them.
Yes.
But it's locked in at that number.
It's locked in at that number. Whenever
As long as we close.
we issue a note, that note is locked in, but future notes could be at a higher or lower rate.
Up to 10 million.
Yes.
Well, if we,
That
you know,
That has an effect on how I feel about it, yeah.
No, because they won't draw all 10 million at
Well,
one time, they just receive
Right.
the
We-
authorization.
How far is it, is that 2.8?
it's
I think,
1 month is 2.49 as of today. At least that's the quote we got from our financial advisor this morning.
I feel comfortable with what Louis said, especially considering that we're heading into summer, and oftentimes that is where we run into our quorum issues and whatnot. But that's just my thought.
We'd be more comfortable with that, Mr. Chairman. We'd be very comfortable being a notification whenever.
If there's general agreement, why don't we
Is there
plan
general
that?
agreement?
Okay.
So,
So
I'll
we-
make that motion.
We need a motion to
Not sure I'm
authorize the issuance of up to 10 million in notes under the 2018 note purchase agreement with Regions Bank.
That.
So moved.
That. I'll second.
Any opposed? Okay, the motion passed. Next item is Mr. Wood again, which is to consider approval of a memorandum of understanding with the Memorial Park Conservancy.
If anyone's interested, the MOU itself is in the pocket, the rear pocket of your book. Back when what we could refer to somewhat confusingly as a tri-party agreement, which there's actually two, there's one with the city and then there's one regarding Memorial Park. When the tri-party agreement for Memorial Park was approved, it laid out in pretty good detail a vision for constructing the land bridge and funding the land bridge. But it did leave some details open. One of the things that it established was that the total funding was $70.4 million, of which 40.4 was to be provided by the Memorial Park Conservancy and $30 million by UDA. The Standards Committee has been taking a look at how best to get organized and build this thing, and I think it's been the recommendation of the Standards Committee, and it's certainly the staff concurs, that what makes the most sense is to have the UDA hold all of the contracts for design and construction, to give the MPC rights to approve certain things such as the selection of consultants, and that then the MPC would be required to pay UDA as we receive invoices with a proportional share based on the funds that were allocated in the original agreement, being 43% to UDA and 57% to MPC. And the memorandum of understanding accomplishes that, and it is a binding contract that requires them to pay us those funds.
And their funds, the Kinder funds, go through them, is that correct?
Those funds are coming from Kinder Foundation, and the Kinder Foundation would not be happy if they were not properly spent. So I think the risk that MPC is not going to be forthcoming with that money is very, very small to non-existent.
So what are we asking?
What we are asking for the approval of an MOU between the Uptown Development Authority and the Memorial Park Conservancy to provide a administrative framework, basically, for the construction of the land bridge or Central Connector, as it's being called now. And I think the most important point in there is that it does legally obligate them to pay us for their share of design and construction costs.
I think these key points here, I'll just say them again. They're putting in 40 million, we're putting in, UDA would put in 30. We'll hold the contracts. MPC is very important to them to say, well, we're gonna do that. We wanna make sure that we have influence over consultants selected, what the design looks like. The obvious answer is yes, they provide a significant leadership in that role. And then the bottom line is we finally came to an agreement how you actually pay for this. We'll hold the contracts, they'll put the money in our account, then we'll write the checks. So there is protection in there. Right.
And the alternative would be for us each to split up responsibilities, and we don't think that works very well administratively.
Or for the contractors.
I think John will confirm that our relationship, TIRZ relationship with MPC, the Kinder Foundation, and the various consultants and entities working at the moment is and has been very good, so that although this memorializes the agreement, there's nothing new here, and I think for as many big boys and girls that are playing in this sandbox, everything is going extremely well.
I would agree.
So we need a motion to accept or adopt.
To approve the memorandum of understanding for construction of the Central Connector project between Uptown Development Authority and Memorial Park Conservancy.
Just in case anybody's missing, it's in the back pocket of the.
Is there a time frame that this will, is constructed?
October 2022 is what I saw.
Okay.
Substantial completion.
I'll make a motion to approve the MOU.
Second. All approve?
Aye.
All approval with abstention, and the motion passes. The next item of business is an update from Mr. Tomby and from John Breeding,
The,
current project.
thank you. We're gonna talk about Coastal Boulevard, the west loop of the Uptown Transit Center today, as well as TxDOT's reconstruction of the 59-610 interchange. I don't know, those of you may have noticed, and Robert's gonna get all the hard questions here today, but we erected our first transit station This is southbound at Uptown Park. Those are welded, the metal work is done off-site. It's brought in, lifted by cranes. Did we end up with two pictures here?
We did.
You're gonna have to hit it, there we go. And took a couple hours lifting it, setting it in place for someone who finds it very difficult to cut a 45-degree corner. Being able to identify where the bolts are and where the holes should be is pretty amazing to me. But they brought it in, set it down, bolted it up. Within the next couple of weeks, Robert, I think you said, we'll be bringing in the glass as early as next week. We'll be installing the glass on this shelter, and then in May, I think we're seeing 2 deliveries of stations, and the rest of the stations will be done throughout the summer of this year. So pretty interesting, sort of a real achievement and another part of implementing this project. You're just gonna, it's not moving for me. And this is something that Delegate and her staff have been taking on. The Metro Board will eventually be the arbiters of what the names of the stations will be. But they try to do things in a manner that reflects things that are of the community where these projects are built. And ultimately, I think I'd point out down here near the bottom, the Uptown Board recommends station names. In May, we have been asked to come to the Metro Board at just Thursday after our next Wednesday meeting. This is not on our agenda for you to quote approve names today, but we'd like to sort of go through this, get you thinking about them. If you have any suggestions, and then we'll actually put it on the agenda for your approval or recommendation at our May board meeting. We have not been terribly sophisticated in identifying names. And
Seems to be in order.
and I don't know why Dahlia went from the south to the north, when obviously north to south is the proper way to do it. But we wanted to put something out, get some feedback. These major bus routes of Richmond Corridor and Westheimer, we think that's important. And so we said, well, it could be the Richmond Avenue Station, it could be the Richmond Station. If others come up with better names, including this august group here, would certainly, this is an opportunity to discuss that. Perhaps more confusing is the next one, which the next station is at West Alabama in front of Williams Tower. That is perhaps the closest station to an entrance to the Galleria. And so we thought, we felt like there needs to be a quote-unquote Galleria station name, and so could it, and also we're going to see it, the third station, Westheimer, could loosely be thought of. And so we said, if it's just a Galleria station and there's just a Westheimer station, then that would be okay, but we could also have a Galleria South and a Galleria North perhaps, as we'll show here. Della, you go to the next one. Go ahead.
Well, back when we built this Uptown Bank, we couldn't call it the Galleria area because of Hines, right? That was, couldn't use the word Galleria. I don't know if it's
Yeah, I
still
think
thought
that,
that way, that's
well,
gone by the wayside.
That ship has sailed, I think.
Yeah.
And I would be concerned about calling that West Alabama Galleria. I think that for the person who doesn't know, that'd really be confusing.
Do you think Westheimer there's probably a desire to have a station named the Galleria Station?
Oh, I think so. And let me say, I have, nor does Hines
Yeah.
any interest at all in the Galleria at this point, but I'm just thinking, we really ought to be thinking about all people, the riders, and so the Richmond Avenue station really does tell you something. It's on Richmond Avenue, so I'd rather see it called the West Alabama station than the Galleria station, because I don't think it's informative.
Could it be something else like the Tower Station?
I'd suggest you get on the internet and vote. So I think we can make that modification. I think that's a real,
Well, it's just something.
that's really not an easy yes or no, and so, let's look at, for example, then Westheimer. So the Westheimer station makes a lot of sense. I think most people would think that's kind of the Galleria station too, even if walking from it might be a couple inches longer than the other way. But I think having a West Alabama station and then having a Westheimer station, we could even have, as you see here, a Westheimer Galleria station. I think both of those names kind of are important there.
They could be the Galleria stations with Westheimer.
You need them separate names.
You think?
Galleria, Westheimer.
You could have Galleria, Westheimer.
One is the Galleria, another is Westheimer.
Well, that's a little bit where we fade back to West Alabama being called the Galleria station,
Yeah.
which you could get access through the tower or through the parking garage or through even lesser. This Westheimer station, for those who know, maybe if you're a tourist, there's even a possibility of walking off of the station on the sidewalk and being able to walk down Lewis into the parking garage there and getting out of the rain.
Well,
So-
where does it let you off? Will it let you off on which
That's what I
side
was
of
gonna
the
ask.
street?
Okay,
Are you crossing
if you are southbound on Post Oak Boulevard,
southbound Boston Boulevard?
the station for Westheimer is immediately south of Westheimer. If you're northbound, the station immediately north.
You're not crossing Westheimer.
So,
Okay,
So,
you're right there.
depending on which direction you're going,
Oh.
Lewis, a pro would say, well, if I'm going northbound, get off at the West Alabama. So,
This is gonna be hard.
Yeah,
It
well,
is.
because I look at it and I say, Galleria would be where I am literally walking into the Galleria. And Alabama, for example, if I'm driving, that makes sense, because I'm going into the parking garage, not necessarily directly into the Galleria.
There's no Galleria is designed such, it's not real pedestrian friendly about getting into it.
Yeah.
The Neiman Marcus entrance is
It's no longer
no longer being the preferred place for people to come in. There's kind of front doors near Neiman on the north side, north parking lot. The West Alabama offers a way that you can, if we spend a little effort working with the Galleria, could probably create some new ways that could get them into the parking garage, that could get them into the building, et cetera. So, yeah, this is why you have these kind of convoluted names here, trying to recognize that Westheimer is Westheimer. That's Richmond and Westheimer are the second and third, or maybe even Westheimer may now be the #1 bus route in the metro system. And so it's it's a significant name. So I would ask that these aren't printed out, I believe, in the board book, but we could get them printed out before you leave and get you to think about that and maybe jot down some alternatives. We're flexible.
I think there's a lot of people, I don't know what percentage, that north and south is just, they just can't figure that part out. So, the street names they can.
Yeah.
Um,
And so just
The
talking.
riders we're talking about.
I think that I think the Metro Board would like something that says Galleria.
I think every name needs to start with the street and finish with whatever you wanna add. So,
So the
you have a
Westheimer
Westheimer Galleria, you have a West Alabama Galleria,
Oh,
you
okay.
have a Guilford Court.
Let's do that. Let's add
And you
that.
have St. Philippi, and if you wanna add something after the street reference, like Galleria, you do that. But let's go with that / strategy, street first,
I like that.
whatever else it needs second. And I think
That
that's your
landmark
first
could
draft.
change, probably the street name won't change, but the landmark could change someday. So-
Right, but the landmark second, after the / start with the street.
And so I'll take you down now
Look at you.
I'll take you down to Guilford Court, and although Post Oak Central is the name of this complex, this is kind of Post Oak Central too.
Can we
You know.
charge everybody for the name of the landmark on it?
We could put these out to bid. I think Guilford Court and Ambassador Way stations make it easier than trying to figure out if it's Post Oak Central or if it's Boulevard Place, because those names can change. And you can see here for number 5, Ambassador Way, we tried, it's Boulevard Place South and Post Oak Central North. Ambassador Station makes it a lot easier recommendation. And then we get bored here sometimes as well, so San Felipe just offers innumerable opportunities to confuse people. San Felipe Station, but if you'll notice, it also has historical reference here to Santa Fe Trail in the Santa Fe de Austin Station. So
You cannot use the word Austin?
we can't. It's been moved second by the Aggies. Okay, so I think.
Longhorn?
I think that probably, from what I'm hearing, that if there's any cultural place, it's West Alabama Galleria, Westheimer Galleria, but probably just the rest of these should be the street. Are y'all comfortable in that general direction?
Yeah, I think every station
think
needs
so.
to lead with the street name,
Okay.
and then some will have slashes.
Right
Yeah,
now,
it's-
the only slash we have is, I think it's Galleria, okay?
You might add a few.
And Boulevard Place. I saw a Boulevard Place.
Yeah, again, I wanna get where you guys are drifting, and I wanna make sure we've got this on the list, because we have this out asking Survey Monkey what they think, and we're also talking to businesses, et cetera. The last one, at Uptown Park, Mr. Fertitta, we have battling developments here. Uptown Park is the boulevard, but then there's also Post Oak, and then there's a park, so we had a little fun with this. Uptown Park is probably our preferred, but we'll see what the survey says.
Yeah, the second one on Station 7 is no good.
Yeah,
It'd
I
be
don't
just
like
cute.
that either. I think we should rename that Longhorn Station.
Yeah, that's too far
7?
from the road.
Okay, well, we think that's probably the case.
Yeah, that's just misleading.
Yeah.
But it's close to Tanglewood Middle School.
It is a landmark.
No, sorry,
All right,
no logic there.
all right, so, this is out on, Delia, what are we doing, Survey Monkey or something? It's out.
Pushing it through social media.
And,
Twitter,
and,
Instagram.
and I think that Uptown Park is actually we're not gonna call it Uptown Park / Hollyhurst, but I think Uptown Park is probably the leading candidate.
Well,
I
it
think
should be
eight-
Hollyhurst.
Yeah, 8 should lead with Hollyhurst and then
Uptown
/
Park.
Uptown.
No, Uptown Park Boulevard, the north leg of that is Uptown Park Boulevard, legitimately called, named officially City of
Okay.
Houston.
Well, you
And
can lead with
Hollyhurst-
that as long as it's the street.
Yeah.
Do you think, right,
It is,
Fair enough.
it's.
unless
And
you.
then I would slash it with Hollyhurst and then
Alright.
you're done.
We could do that.
My one recommendation is no matter what we do, is that it remain consistent with the streets. If they're gonna be first or last, that it remains consistent throughout.
Then I think that
Right.
what I'm hearing from you, I like this, Uptown Park, Hollyhurst would be that station right now.
Cause that's the only one with 2 streets.
No, so is Westheimer and Galleria.
Well,
or
there it's gonna be-
Galleria isn't a street though.
There it's gonna be Westheimer Galleria,
Mhm.
and West Alabama will be West Alabama Galleria. And again, I've just gotten feedback that they kinda expect to have a Galleria station name. And, we can live with West Alabama Galleria and Westheimer Galleria.
Yeah, I think you get 2, yeah.
I'm comfortable with
Well, is Hollyhurst gonna have a name change to Fertitta something?
that. It might be, it might get
Tillman
changed, it
Trail.
might get changed to Uptown Park, but I don't think it would get changed.
So that one has, the street changes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
We could name one of the stations.
No, but at the end of the day, and I'm sure there'll be plenty more
Why don't we
discussion,
just name them after
someone
us?
whose feelings are hurt, but I really think clarity for the user
Yeah.
really ought to trump everything else. I mean, we don't have to have billboards along here. If people
I think we
can't
can
see
start
the
working on that.
retail establishment, they ought to order online.
We're gonna walk through this based on your input, the Richmond, the West Alabama Galleria, the Westheimer Galleria, the Guilford, the Ambassador Way, the San Felipe, the Four Oaks?
Garrettson.
Garrettson or Four Oaks?
Garrettson slash something, whatever it
Yeah,
is.
that's the two-streeter also, Four
Yeah,
Oaks,
so
Garrettson.
2 streets in that name.
Okay, that way,
Right and left.
it keeps us totally,
As long as it's
yes.
consistent.
Yep.
All right, good. Now, just make sure we get this set up that way.
Garrettson has.
What does
two
match up with
What
Garrettson?
did you,
What does it turn into, anybody know?
excuse me?
What does Garrettson turn into?
Four Oaks Drive.
Judson Robinson Lane.
Garrettson has two T's in it.
Okay, we'll spell it correctly this next time. Okay, this is not an insignificant thing to have to talk about this. It's very serious. Metro's been very worried about our progress in naming the stations. So this is, oh, you got it. So this is now, Robert, you wanna get up and get ready?
It looks so awesome.
Keep
I'd
going.
gladly fly over it if we could.
There's
I
no
I
comment?
give the tree project an A+. I mean, those trees really look great.
How are you keeping them alive? They look great.
Those trees, I have to give Robert credit. 3 years ago, he's saying we need to order trees now. We're coming up on our new
I wanna be
station.
on the vitamins they're on.
Dave, if you wanna stop when you get a good view of this, go ahead, get a little closer.
You know, the nice thing is you can use the bus lane for all your workmans.
Yeah,
That's
that's
true.
Oh, my goodness.
okay.
Few months, that's what we need.
This we thought we could move through this faster if we did it manually.
We're trying hard to get the traffic signals going. The temporary signals with the wooden poles are still there. It takes a lot, including getting the striping done, getting everything done at the corners for the approval and turn on of the new traffic signals. So it's a struggle to get the city and us dancing to get the signals going, but we're starting in the middle, or continuing in the middle where we get the stations. Like John said, we're fabricating, we'll continue to put them up into the summer. And we have all the electronical stuff and the plumbing in the medians for irrigation and to bring it back up to grade. And we're starting right now to fill it back in and start the color ribbons will come back start appearing in the next few weeks. Traffic signal work.
Well, Robert just told you that we're planting flowers.
soon.
So,
Can we have a little applause here? Hey, I wanna tell you, I can't wait for the day that whether or not the flowers are blooming is my biggest problem.
Yes.
That's a big, wonderful.
has your hate mail stopped? Or,
What do you mean? That's an economic indicator.
We have people that don't read and write.
well, I mean, I guess.
Jim Scarborough's best buddy, he helps us watch the trees and things like that, so.
Oh, he's stopped.
That's right.
And again,
Are
if you
you-
hold
are
it
you
right
leaving
here,
Mazaril's?
one thing, Dave, if you could, one of the things we just passed up was Dinnerstein's, construction, and what you need to know is that until they are done, we will not do our frontage along there, so for the next couple of years, that's what you're going to see.
He will be through in a year.
Huh?
He'll be through in a year.
You bet. Okay.
Pretty quick.
Wow.
And then down the road, the same thing at Zaddix. We have held up work in front of Zaddix. You can see our green fence here on the left. We have got vines on it that will serve the place of the old ligustrum hedges and take up a heck of a lot less room. And then Zaddix are gonna be tearing down Post Oak Row and building a new retail center there with some offices in it.
These last two platforms are being ready to
When are you
board.
when does the state gonna quit blocking everything to the?
We have some dates for you on that. You can see here, we're starting to install the green fence over here on the left-hand side along the Tanglewood property.
Congratulations.
Robert, when is your estimate of when you will have the stainless steel traffic signals operational?
By the end of May, we should have most of them.
The southern ones when they,
This weekend, the big poles go up at Westheimer here, the 52 footers are coming back up, and then we'll get the arms up as soon as the poles are erected, and then start working on this intersection too. Stop here a minute. This is the last area. We had, and this has just been poured this morning, this little connection into the roadway here. This is the station, the bus lanes are done, and this will be where the ramp comes up to that, and that follows the platform work. Redoing the corner of the Galleria to get enough pedestrian movement here.
And for
This is the
those
area
of
that
you.
was worst, or least completed, and it's getting there.
Trees that have been planted here obviously kicked off their leaves as they do in the spring, and it's coming back. They're lime green.
Some sort of the fence, then they can have something growing on it.
Yes,
Where did I see
that, you saw that all along the east
Okay.
side. Kendall shop right, you're gonna see it here in just a second. Right there, see to our left, the fence. Oh, Robert, could you point
Well, I
that?
saw it today, and
Yeah.
I see it, right
Yeah.
there on,
So in fact, they're already planting the vines, we're doing some,
you're gonna do that on both?
Any place that has
anywhere where there's
parking.
parking lots. Where we don't have room for a ligustrum hedge, down at Dillard's, for example, we have ligustrums went back in, it's only where we're kind of physically constrained. If you also look in here, we're also installing our pedestrian lights on the northbound side, on the left-hand side, I think that's the one right there. And we're in the process of having them all the way down to Westheimer.
So I hate to ask this question, but I get asked all the time, when we won't have buses running for another year?
You will probably see, you'll see, right now, everybody's working on revenue operations and in the first quarter of 2020. And, but you'll probably see tests going on out here as early as October.
Really?
Test meaning, given a
Buses-
certain number of buses?
A bus or two, just running the system.
Will they be our buses?
There'll
or-
be
The
the
new
Metro bus,
The one that's been designed?
the ones with, and the question, and we are working with them now on sort of how it's branded, what it looks like. We've had a couple of meetings with them, and we'll see. The idea is try to do something a bit more elegant. It won't be a white bus with a red and blue stripe. And hopefully it will be something a little bit more.
Want to mention Williams Tower?
Go ahead. If you will, Robert, go ahead.
Williams Tower has a design, has hired a contractor, and they're starting their work to redo the front entrance to the building with our construction done. So we've been waiting for that for a long time, and we're glad to see them out there working. So we've given them the curb lane to work from with our traffic control.
Can I say that looks much better than what it used to anyway with that huge
Ooh,
entrance?
I don't know if you want to do that.
Just get over with.
Okay, at the, again, the south end, everything else is about the same. We're just cleaning up the trees, behind the sidewalks, and definitely getting it ready for the.
Robert,
fall.
explain to these good folks why there are no trees planted in this area.
South of the arches, at this point, we have to leave this open for the possibility of TxDOT's using this area here to transition to get the work done at Richmond. So you can see that they're over here with the paving for the southbound. The
Go forward,
existing
Dave.
southbound is this way. That's it, right here. This will be the new southbound. And then when they get the northbound will come here and need to transition over to the existing northbound. And that area needs to be open for them and their traffic, what they call their traffic control plans for that, getting that work done. The last last weekend and this weekend, and the next weekend, they'll be working through Richmond. They're doing a fast track pavement of Richmond. We've started to do the pavement on the southbound lanes, soon as they get that done, they're gonna northbound and then in the middle, and then we know that they have their work done. The intersection's been moved over, and they can start working on the ramp alongside that existing ramp.
Robert participates in the meetings on a weekly basis with TxDOT. Do they have a guesstimate when this will be complete?
Again, they don't wanna make a commitment at this time. We're trying to push them to combine the phase 2, phase 3 together, because we think there's enough room to sneak in here and do that, but they haven't committed to that. That would be their contractor. He's not ready to do that at this point.
But what is
It's
the
a
guess?
positioning.
Because as long as they're doing that, that's sort of,
Wait,
yeah,
November
this November, which year?
this year. So there's two questions, Robert. To Richmond and then south of Richmond.
You want me to guess?
I want you to guess.
I believe by this fall, they will be through Richmond and the intersection, the pavement will be there. Question is, after the depressed section coming up, where they have to do some work on their depressed walls, if that will be ready or that will still be under construction into the November, December timeframe. At that point, we don't have a real commitment on that depressed section and the structure they have to build over it. The intersection of pavement here is easier and can get done.
So they're pouring concrete now down to that point.
To-
I don't think, and we have to, who builds the station here, Robert?
They are gonna get all the underground done.
Yes.
As soon as they get all the underground and the pavement done in this area, they're gonna step back and ask if we would mind coming in and putting in the traffic signal back with our standards versus they're going forward with their standards, which we don't want to happen here. Second would be the platforms that they thought they were too complex. And they wanted us to, if we would do it, and we agreed that we would go ahead and put the platforms in for them. All the underground, like I said, it will be there. Excuse me.
are they paying for that?
We're going to ask them to pay for that in working kind to what we will do.
The bottom line is that we have, as part of the grant, have left funds with TxDOT to build this. The local match, we think we could take that money instead of sending them, we could probably do some work for them more efficiently than they could do for themselves. But Lewis, I think two things. I think the station and Richmond, there's really not a lot of question about that being toward the end of the year. And that we don't think there is a reason why they can't physically complete the project. They may have a contractor who says it's not in my contract, and so there's some negotiations probably having to be made. And then our transit center itself won't be done until December. So all of that kind of leads us to, that's where that first quarter of 2020 sort of comes in, is when the TxDOT's piece to the north, TxDOT's piece to the south, and our transit center are constructed.
I mean, there's an argument that says until that transit center is finished and until this intersection is finished, we use that as a reason, I think an appropriate reason for not running buses, because I'm concerned if we have nothing but buses shuttling back and forth with Post Oak, that we're gonna have negative ridership.
I think that's where everybody is, like where Metro is, et cetera. And if we could we jump to the north end? I don't know, those of you who drive through the Post Oak Boulevard at West Loop intersection, we are, what you funded, participated in back in 2004 is now happening. If you remember, there was a lot of discussion, Lewis and Kendall, y'all were probably around, where we actually forced Metro to work with TxDOT to make sure that an entrance into the West Loop was in the design. It happened. Same thing on the south end. We made those investments way back in the early 2000s. And so now we're breaking through. This is actually sort of standing in the middle of Post Oak Boulevard looking north. So, and then Delia's got an aerial here that she can run through. This looks north, Post Oak Boulevard's just beneath us at this moment. That's Uptown Park, the shopping center. This is where TxDOT designed for the bus lanes to come up, turn left, go north, and actually break through. And this will then gradually come up at about 3%, and somewhere probably along in here begins to be elevated enough that you could bring the freeway back together. It comes down, and it's, as you can see, is being constructed as we speak in this video. And it will then come down to Buffalo Bio, and it will then transition, go ahead, Delia.
No, it transitions over here, there's an S right here.
And so the busway will be elevated in this section. And then it will just transition from being in the middle.
Go over?
It'll go over the southbound main lanes and tie in right there.
You know, when you tell people about this bus coming up from the city, they're like, come on, you know.
And
it's-
so from here to the,
It's pretty awesome.
to the northwest station, is that all complete?
No, it will continue up here, and we're gonna answer Mr. Beeson's question about schedule, about when they're gonna quit blocking things here in a moment. We get to Woodway, so everything's built from Woodway down to where it transitions to the middle. They're building from south to the north, and then you see north of Woodway, they're building the piers and vents for that structure as well. And there's no traffic operating on southbound frontage road between Memorial and Woodway. And I've got dates, Robert, when's the projected date, Delia? You've got those, so the northbound frontage road, you kind of mean southbound, don't you?
Oh, southbound, you're right.
You're one of those people that doesn't know the north and the
I
south.
usually do.
The video is shot one day.
Wait, we refer to that as directionally changed.
So, southbound frontage road will be open, Mr. Beeson, the southbound frontage road will be open in June. Woodway exit will be, both Woodway exits will be open in June. And,
That's in less than
So
2 months.
9 more weeks.
Yeah.
well, did I say June 1st, Mr. Beeson, or did I say June?
You should say June already.
You might be another 30 days there. TxDOT thinks, Robert,
Want to know where to move my wife for the next 90 days.
The full closure has made them able to accelerate that area. They said they would get it done in 3 months, that would be mid-June, if they can do that at that point. They have not found any reasons why they couldn't get it done, they haven't bumped into anything.
the contract says a project completed that all the way, and I want to go back and Delia, finish up the video. If you can quickly get us to Woodway.
Do you have any leverage on these?
Not a lot,
completion dates?
TxDOT.
Okay.
Please, so as we continue on, and then we get to Memorial, we'll go across Memorial, we'll go into the median. Robert, and I don't know exactly which of these intersections, either the first one or the second one.
It's the second one. They
This
touched
one
down
right
in
here
there, and they're at grade where that
will
truck
be
was
at
just
grade at this
pulling out.
point. And then Metro is making some minor street improvements and maybe even some improvements across the bridge and taking it to the Northwest Transit Center. So,
So this is not exclusive, Metro sharing this one.
Are we changing the road going across the bridge?
I believe the road is not changing it, no, we're not doing it for sure, Metro is not proposing it, I don't
I
believe.
mean, the one across I-10.
going across. So, bottom line is Metro has improvements to do on Post Oak Road and the lake. And so they say they'll be done in March. We think it could be largely completed in December, right? And so we feel good about this. I think the critical piece, we have a transit center day. Can you take us to that? Just very quickly, if you would look around over here, are you gonna switch us, Dee? Dee is actually, you had it up there for a moment. Here we go.
This is real.
This is looking just south
towards Bel Air with.
Into the
Walmart
transit
and-
center, you can see all the steel work is done and the road to the transit center is, been poured.
This is T-ramp, this is the structure, this is columns for the structure
No,
being put up.
and you might point out the HOV lane, or
And the
back where
HOV
you are.
lane is right here.
you're right in there. So there goes Finch Road. So, and then as you can see, all the vertical starting columns are coming out of the ground. Art, you wanna add
So the
anything?
hard part was the unknowns on the below grade, which they did find out that was a railroad siding. They did have chunks of concrete and railroad ties that they complained about continuously in the mud. But we're out of that now, we're going vertical, and that makes things a little bit more controlled, and things are going good. We have a new schedule just published from them that says the end of the year it'll be done.
We think Metro will be able to go on site again installing their equipment in November still?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's leading to this. Can we get back to the other? So again, that sort of orient you, you see, these were Monday shots, I think. And so that's where we are very quickly. The big interchange project, as any of you drive through, lots of construction activity. What eventually is going to happen is that we will have we're separating the 59 of the 610 southbound to 59 inbound. It's separated from the 610 southbound to 59 outbound or Sugarland. We're separating those into different exits, and you'll have a Westheimer entrance that will tie in this, so we'll get new Westheimer entrances that will take us directly downtown, a different one that'll take us directly going outbound. Those are all within the next, my goodness, part of that, is that, yeah, it's inbound, summer of '21. Eventually, even the main lanes will be reconstructed in this section. So it's a big project, 325 million or so, and we're well into it.
So John, this is not our project,
That's not our project.
but the other project is our project. What is the date on which we put on our evening gowns and tuxedos, and I guess you can wear whatever you want to, and have the grand opening party? And that everything is done. The guys need to sweep the street, just to be sure it's clean.
Well, let me ask you a question. If you wanna call opening day or ribbon cutting day is the day that we start revenue service from the Northwest Transit Center to West Park Transit Center, I would say that day is in the first quarter of 2020. If you're talking about when all the trees will be wonderfully displayed along with blooming flowers on Post Oak Boulevard only, that's July this year. So my
But
question,
since this is not a garden project, but a transportation project, we ought to focus on,
I would-
for right now anyway.
I think-
We should
You
focus
must
on
be
the
confused.
revenue.
yeah, I think we ought to, I think that's when you'll see the.
January of next year.
March of next year.
Ish, March-ish.
First quarter. I think our schedule says our transit center and our contractor says our transit center will be done, by the end of this year. I believe that the West Loop is the north of Post Oak Boulevard is gonna be done by the end of this year. The piece between Richmond and underneath is thing where all the agencies, TxDOT, Metro, and we are all pushing to get done by the end of the year. You get all your physical facilities done, Metro gets it all, all their equipment in. They do test runs, and then everybody puts a tie on and has revenue service March of 2020.
And the public in general is not inconvenienced because construction is finished. Maybe there are a tree or two to plant or sidewalk.
On our
finish.
point, for Post Oak Boulevard, by the end of the summer, you'll say, we'll have sawhorses. And at the same time, Metro begins to get their buses in. Would it be surprised that we run a bus down and see how the geometrics work, making sure everything is good? That could happen late this summer, early this fall. But on a test basis only.
So first quarter of next year is a time that we can tell our friends and neighbors and enemies that, should any of us have one, that the project will be finished.
You
and
can go, you can
operational.
take them out and go ride the bus from one end to the other.
A year.
Are there any other questions or comments? If, then I would like to recess